So I just wanted to say thanks to the organising committee for inviting me to speak and giving me the opportunity to come and visit this beautiful country. And I'd just like to quickly give you just give you an overview of my talk. So I'll give you a quick introduction to the Global Plant Council, a little look at the current global challenges, and also some of the plant science solutions. And at the end, I probably won't have that much time. I know we're delayed, so I might introduce you to an initiative I'm involved in, which is part of the Diversity Seek initiative. So the Global Plant Council is a coalition of plant and crop science societies from across the globe. So the Global Plant Council is a coalition of regional plant and crop science societies from across the globe. Currently we have about 50,000 plant and crop science experts that are part of our 29 member organisations, and those are spread over 6 continents. And this just shows you a map of this distribution we have across the world, which I think is quite good. We're still missing a few societies in a few places, but as you can see here in Latin America, we have the Argentinian Plant Physiology Society, we have the Chilean National Network of Plant Biology, and we also have the Brazilian Society of Plant Physiology as well. And if there are other societies in Latin America that you think we should know about, that should be members, please contact me. I'm about during the conference. So the GPC has 4 core values. So these are sort of the pillars of GPC, and they are that we are plant science based, and really we're interested in about the transition of fundamental research into applied solutions. So this is what Edith talked about yesterday, and we really need to make sure that we have both a great basic research in the countries around the world, but also that this is being applied as well. So I think this balance and this connection is really important. And then we also promote collaboration across boundaries, be that geographic or scientific. And we're also inclusive and equitable. Any scientist or any society is welcome to join, no matter where they are in the world, no matter what they work on. And we also are trying to bring scientists around the world together so that we can speak with a single voice. So, the mission of the Global Plant Council is to facilitate the development of plant-based solutions to global problems, to foster international collaboration, to enable the effective use of knowledge and resources, and also to act as a forum to bring together all those involved in plant and crop research. So we currently have 4 priority areas. These are adaptation to climate change, agricultural productivity and sustainability, and food and human health. And we also have a 4th one, which is the sharing of knowledge and resources, which is important to all our initiatives. And for me, this is really key. I think the data and information has a key role to play in all our futures. All scientists, be they plant or not, have a data mountain, and we're creating more and more data all the time. We really need to think about how we store this data. What is it that we store? Do we store sequence reads? Do we store the analysis? We need to think about this, because this is going to be growing and growing over time. We also need to think about how we describe our data, or the metadata that goes with our experiments. So how did you do your experiment? Were your plants grown in 12 hours light, 12 hours dark? Were they in the glass house? Were they in the field? Were they in a cabinet? How did you grow them? How much water? And then people will really understand your experiment, so when they go back, they can compare their data with your data. And this will be really important in the future. And then we need to think about all the data analysis. How did you analyse your data? What machine did you use if you were doing proteomics or metabolomics? Or what analysis package did you use if you were doing a sequence analysis? So this is really important for people to reuse your data in the future. And so with all this information, you can make one package, and you can make this all available so people can use your data in the future, or perhaps more importantly, so you can use other people's data as well. So within these 3 initiatives, we also have 3, within our 3 priority areas, we have 3 initiatives, one of which is the Digital Seed Bank, where we aim to capture and exploit the wealth of crop diversity to identify new genes, alleles and genetic networks. And then we have one in biofortification that's looking at the nutritional value of crops. We've just started this summer actually, so we're just at the beginning. And we also hope to have another one in stress resilience, and hopefully we will hold a workshop at the ISPMB next summer on this area. And so currently the executive board of the Global Plant Council, we have William Gruesome, who is our chair and acting president, and he is from the European Plant Science Organisation. We have Henry Nugent as our vice chair, and he's part of the American Society of Agronomy and Crop Science Society of America. And we have Gustavo Haviland, who's here in the audience, who is our treasurer, and he's from the Brazilian Society of Plant Physiology. And then we have representatives from the African Crop Science Society and also the Chinese Society of Plant Biology. So we're spread across the world, and then I'm in the UK. So we face a number of growing global challenges at the minute, the first of which is feeding an ever-growing population, the second of which is creating a sustainable source of energy, and we heard a lot about that this morning, and also the third is protecting our environment. So I just wanted to talk to you about one of these topics, and that's about feeding the world. We don't have much time, so I can show it to people later, it's quite fun. So how do we feed the 9 billion that are going to be on the planet in 2050? At the minute, the population is rising by about 1.14% every year, and so we're going to have an extra 2 billion people on the planet in 2050. And this, people project, requires that we need a 50% to a 70% increase in our production of food. And we also need to do that in a way in which we reduce the resources, and also we do this in a sustainable manner. So, how can plant science help? Well, we can develop solutions that make the better use of our agricultural land. We can also make better use of resources, be it water or fertiliser. And we can also think about how we can mitigate the effects of climate change, so drought tolerance. So, if we think about better use of land, it's fun, my slide's off. If we think about this, then we can think about the increased production in the future has to come from increased yield. We can't use more land. If we do, this will have a huge environmental cost. So if you just look at the figure here, at the moment, about 38 to 39% of all land in the world is used in agriculture, whilst on the far right, about 15% is not available to us for agriculture. Maybe this is due to erosion, the fact that it has houses on it, or it's in an urban area. So that means there's about 46.5% land left in the world that's currently not in agricultural production. We could think about using this to increase our yield, but the majority of this land is forest, wetland, grassland, and if we put this into agricultural production, we would increase greenhouse gas emission, we would reduce biodiversity, and we would disrupt some of the most critical ecosystems in the world. So we have to think about something else. So the most obvious thing to make better use of the land is to increase the crop yield. And obviously this is exactly what we did in the first green revolution of the 1960s. We had better crop varieties, we had use of fertiliser, irrigation, and also machinery. But for many places in the world, this has actually had a bit of a negative environmental impact. So when we're thinking about the second green revolution we need today, we need to increase yield on our less productive farmlands. So this really means closing the yield gap between the current production levels and the ones at which you could actually produce. And we need to do this by precision farming systems. We also need to think about improved crop varieties. We need to think about reducing soil erosion and also improving soil quality. And I'd also say, taking on from Edith's talk yesterday, we need to think about local solutions as well. So this is just a map of the world that shows you this yield gap. So the areas in red are the areas in the world where the actual yield is low compared to what its potential could actually be. And you can see that the majority of this is in sub-Saharan Africa, where the majority of people who don't have much to eat are. Also, you can see in Eastern Europe this is true as well, and some in some areas of South and Latin America as well. And so it's really important we think about how we use our current technologies, the technologies that we use every day, to help people think about how they could increase their yields. And so when it comes to limited resources, this could be many things, but here I'll just give you one example of water. So water availability is obviously a critical step in plant growth and development. And 80% of all world agriculture is rain-fed. So all the agriculture, or a huge percent of it, the reason we have it is because we have rain. And changes in the amount of the precipitation and evaporation patterns are going to significantly affect crop development and crop yield in the future. And this is just some statistics here, that by 2030, at least half of the population will experience severe water shortages. And you can see that here, that one of the countries that they're, according to a graph from the recent IPCC report, is Brazil. But this is the areas, obviously, areas that are coming into a huge amount of agriculture. We really need to think about how we're using our water. And so future water shortages are just one effect of climate change. And in the recent International Panel on Climate Change, their recent report that came out at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we will all see a reduction in crop yield due to climate change. If we have just a 1 to 2 degree increase in our temperature, this will affect drier areas in the world. But if we have a 3 to 4 degrees rise in temperature, the majority of the areas of the world where we produce crops are going to suffer. We're also going to have more severe weather events, flood, drought, and also heat waves. And this in turn is going to increase or change the pattern of the pests and pathogens that we see in our fields. And so all of this is very likely to cause increase in food prices. And so this is just a map of the world to show this. So what happens to crop yields if we have a 3 degrees increase in temperature? And you can see that we have an extreme negative effect. So anything in the dark red is going towards a 50% reduction in yield. And this will, you can see it affects a huge swathe of the world, but it's mainly in the southern hemisphere. And so I think we really need to think about the crop varieties we're thinking about for the future. The ones we have now are probably not going to be suited for the ones we need in the next 50 years. So, how can plant science help? Well, for me, this is really about taking all the wonderful, fundamental, basic, cutting-edge research that you guys do and really thinking about how we put this into the field, or as Edith said yesterday, how do we tip the balance? I'm just going to show you a few examples of this. So as I said, that pests and pathogens are have a really large effect on how our yield happens in the field. So on average, it's projected that crop yields, pests and pathogens account for about 30% of this. So if we could reduce their impact, we could definitely increase our yield. So this is just one example, and these are the blight-resistant potatoes. So potato blight, or Phytophthora infestanus, costs about, for the UK, about £500 per hectare, whereas worldwide, the losses due to potato blight are about 5.7 billion US dollars. So this pathogen has been worked on for many years, and recently in the UK, they found a gene, a resistance gene from wild potato, and they've now placed it in a commercial variety. They've put these potatoes out in the field for 3 years, and the GM variety is completely fully resistant. And this is just shown here in this slide. So on the left is the GM resistant variety right at the end of the season, and this is in a wet UK summer, so very easy to have potato blight. And it's completely grown, the yield is very large, while those on the right are the commercial variety without the resistant gene, and you can see there's a complete difference. So this is just one example of how we think about dealing with pests and pathogens. And then if we think about better use of resources, obviously water use efficiency, or more crop per drop is something that we really all need to think about. 70% of all the water we extract actually goes to be used in agriculture, but as you've just seen, our water is becoming more and more scarce. So, and also irrigation can lead to soil erosion. So this is just one technique that has been thought about to help water use efficiency, and it's known as partial root drying. So what happens is one side of the plant's roots are given water, the other side are in drought conditions. On the side with no water, you get increased signals to close stomata, so that you reduce the loss of water and water use, whilst on the other side there's watered, and this maintains the water status and the water integrity in the plant, so the plant survives, it doesn't wilt, and in many cases, here there's a strawberry plant, it will always go on to produce fruit. And so this technique has been used in many, many different crops, but it works really well in fruit. So it's been tested in apple, in orange, in strawberry, and I think one of the best examples is the grapevine in Australia, where using this technique they've used 40% less water. And so then when we think about climate change, one of the great examples that I know about is the submersion-tolerant rice. So in India and Bangladesh, about 5 million acres of the rice fields are very prone to flooding every year. And if rice is submerged, completely submerged underwater, within 2 or 3 days it dies. And with climate change, we're going to get more and more floods. And so there is a submersion tolerance gene that's been isolated, and this is from a very low-yielding rice variety. And when it's submerged, the rice actually survives for 2 weeks underwater. So they've taken this gene, and by traditional breeding methods, they've now put this sub-1 gene into 4 or 5 high-yielding rice varieties. It gives a 25% increase in yield, and currently is planted by 4 million farmers in Asia. And so I think this is a great example of the sort of solutions we need for climate change. And I've just got a short video to show you this, because So on the left is the submersion tolerant variety that they plant, and then on the right is the normal variety. It gets flooded for about 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks there's less flooding, and you can see that the submersion tolerant variety that's now in a high yielding variety is absolutely fine. It grows extremely well, whilst the normal variety on the right, which is not tolerant to submergence at all, does not grow as well. And you will see that at the end of the trial, the amount of yield difference is extremely huge. So I hope I've shown you that there's a need that we understand plants, the ecology and their performance more now than ever. And most of that, I think, if I think about the plant science solutions we need for the future, the most important solution as the plant science researcher is you. And so I would say that the things that I think you need to do, you need to think about sharing your knowledge and ideas, both nationally, regionally, and internationally. The more and more I have the honour to go around the world and speak to plant scientists and put many different nationalities together, there's a lot of knowledge that we need to share. There's a lot of practices that we need to exchange, so I'd really encourage you to do that. And also I'd encourage you to work with experts from other disciplines, engineers, mathematicians, and also physicists and computational or people working in IT. I think as we go forward, this is really, really important. And also, we need more investment in plant science. It's very simple. We need more money to do the work we can do, and we need an investment, in my mind, similar to that's for medicine. It's no good that we have drugs for cancer if we can't eat. And so I think that, picking up on what Edith said yesterday, we need each person in the world to convince one member of the public of the importance of plant science. We need to prevent plant blindness. If people understand what plants do for them every day, make your clothes, your food, potentially run your cars on bioethanol, then they'll think about voting for this as well. So it's really important you go out, do outreach, and talk about your science. And I'd also say that you need to recruit young members back into plant science. I think someone said yesterday, but why would a young plant scientist come into this field if there's no money? If I speak to people who are now retiring, who started the Green Revolution, they didn't do it for the money. I bet Norman Borlaug didn't do it for the cash. So, we have to inspire young people that they're going to change the world by doing this. And again, that's important, and that's for you. So I know we're running behind time, so I just want to quickly talk about one other initiative I'm involved in, which is called Diversity Seek, or DivSeek. And what we're going to try and do is unlock the potential of crop diversity stored in the gene banks around the world so that we can have a more productive, sustainable and resilient system for crops and agriculture. And so involved in this are the Global Crop Diversity Trust, the FAO via the Plant Treaty on Genetic Resources, the CGIAR Consortium, so the CGIAR centres around the world, and also the Global Plant Council. And I don't know if you know, but the Global Crop Diversity Trust is trying to protect all the world's crops. They actually have a seed vault near the North Pole in Svalbard, and they are taking diversity from all the gene banks around the world, and then it will be stored here for everyone's future. But what's important, or what I think is important, isn't we don't store it, but we characterise it, so we understand that diversity for our future. So we think about 7 million crop varieties, wild varieties, are conserved in the gene banks around the world. And this is a massive source of genetic potential for accelerating yield gain and increasing crop productivity. But for us to understand it, we really need to have a systematic characterisation of these materials. We need to know what their genomics is, what the phenome looks like, and also what their metabolites look like. And so we need to have them characterised by all our molecular technologies. And then, most importantly to me, we need to make all that data publicly available, but not just somewhere, but somewhere where everyone can use it, and it's in a form that everyone understands as well. So to do this, we've started to bring together the gene bank managers around the world, breeders, obviously the plant and crop researchers, but also database and computational experts. And then we're going to go out and characterise the crop diversity so that we can enhance the use of the materials that are in the gene banks. But ultimately, we really want to know what the genetic variation does, what makes the crop-wild relative more drought tolerant, have an increased yield. So all the examples I showed you, like the potato blight and the rice, these came from crop-wild relatives. And so all of this genetic variation could contribute to plant performance in the future. If you're interested to learn more, obviously speak to me, but we also have a website. And lastly, thank you very much. I hope I made that short. If you want to learn more about the Global Plant Council, we have a website, we have a blog, we're on Twitter. And if you want to sign up to our newsletter, then just email the address at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Are there some questions about this talk?
Hello, Ruth. This is a recurrent topic, the issue of attracting more young people into research. I was wondering if the Global Plant Council has thought of ways of doing this, or whether this has been openly discussed at the Global Plant Council.
So yes, is this working? No. Try it. Is it working? Excellent. So as part of the Global Plant Council, we've discussed this a lot. And one step that we can do quite easily is collect a lot of teaching materials, a lot of inspirational materials, and try and put them in one place online. So that's really what we hope to do. And what I really want to be able to do is also have them translated into, other languages as well. So if there are people here in the audience that will, willing to help me translate them into Spanish, or you have great teaching materials already in Spanish that we can use, please come and talk to me, because we'd like to make a very large bank of these online where you can go out, take out some slides. I have this great video to show you. We'll put that up there as well, but that's the plan for the future.
Otra pregunta. Perdón, si alguien quiere hacerla en castellano, lo traducir. O en portugués, lo mismo.
Okay. I was interested in the aspect of plant responses to environment that you were mentioning also in the databases. Which are the variables you are considering and how you are going to homogenize the database in order to put the information in an easy way and that the other can use it also and understand what is the meaning of that?
So for this, we have a project that we are running currently in Europe to look at how people put their data. And so the idea is you have many drop-down menus which help you describe your data. And so then you're able to select that, so to say what plant you worked on, how you grew it. And so then these will be standardized. And these will help you submit data to databases, be that NCBI, GenBank. And also it will also be used by the journals. So we're in discussions with the journals about how you describe your data for publication as well.
Otra pregunta. Do you want to make another comment? Okay. ¿Sí? We will show a video. Vamos a ver los videos. Yes.
Hello, my name is Evan Fraser, and I work at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. Mostly what I do is to try and understand one of the biggest issues facing our world over the next 50 years. To start, let's consider two images. The first shows us how much food you could buy for $1 on a market in the African nation of Zambia in 2008. The second shows us how much you could buy on the same market for $1 in 2009. What happened in between was skyrocketing food prices, a crisis that has thrown tens, maybe even hundreds of millions into poverty. What's more, the victims haven't suffered quietly. They've rioted, smashed markets, and toppled governments. Remember the revolutions that swept the Middle East in 2011? They all began with people in the streets upset over the price of food. What's more, many of the world's top agricultural experts believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Unless we figure out new strategies to deal with global food security, we may be entering a new and dangerous phase of human history where food, water, and energy shortages threaten not only worse poverty, but also civic unrest and international poverty. There are a number of reasons for this alarm. The first reason is that in most years we produce only just enough food to cover our uses. In fact, in 6 of the last 11 years, we actually consume slightly more food than we produced. And the buffer we take from one year to the next has been steadily falling. So our system already seems fragile. But it's when we look into the future that things grow very dire indeed. Rising populations and our rich diets that take a lot more resources to produce than they used to are driving our demand for food up. And scientists figure we'll need 50% more food by 2050. But producing this food is going to be hard. This is because the rising demand is coming precisely at the same time as high energy prices and climate change are making food harder and more expensive to produce. But hidden in these grim statistics is a four-part blueprint we need to follow. But since each of these strategies is extremely controversial, each requires careful analysis. The first strategy includes science and technology. Today, a major scientific hurdle is to develop technologies that will help farmers reach their potential in terms of the amount of food they produce. Some scientists figure we could easily boost production by 50% just by deploying technologies. This is especially important in regions like sub-Saharan Africa, where many farmers only produce about 20% of what they could due to a lack of good quality seeds, fertilizer, and better equipment. But it's not as if we can take the seeds and equipment that seem to work on North American farms and simply give them away to African farmers. This doesn't work because African soils, cultures, and communities are totally different than in North America or Europe. So scientists must partner with farmers to develop locally appropriate solutions to local challenges. Just using science and technology won't be enough, however. And this is where the second strategy comes in. We must do a better job at distributing the food we provide. To develop this strategy, we need to consider an uncomfortable truth about today's food system. If you take all the food on the planet and divide it equally by all the people on the planet, about 2,700 calories per person per day, and 75 grams of protein per
about 2,700 calories per person per day, and 75 grams of protein per person per day. But because we feed a lot of our food to animals,
or turn corn into ethanol, or simply waste vast amounts, 20 to 50% of the world's food is wasted, or because the people who need the food are too poor to afford it, hunger abounds. So we need to establish ways of making sure that less food is wasted, and the food we do have is better distributed. One way of doing this is through ensuring that international aid organizations have better access to food stores that can be used as short-term food aid in times of crisis. Third, if we want to avoid a hungry future, we need to make sure we keep a healthy population of farms and farmers around our cities. This means we need to support local food systems, which are important because they stand as a buffer between individual consumers and problems that might occur in global markets. Even if local food systems do not feed all of us all the time, they are a critical line of defense against hunger. None of this would be possible without stronger regulation and proactive government policy. I was confronted with the need for better regulation while on a recent tour of a feedlot that was licensed to hold 100,000 cows. There I saw a 410,000 ton pile of manure. That's the weight of about 35,000 elephants. It was a sad reminder of the need for governments to get serious about promoting more sustainable farming. Of course, each of these four strategies has its drawbacks. Critics of technology and markets argue that new technologies inevitably seem to enrich corporations more than helping humanity and the environment. Anti-regulation voices argue that all governments ever do is tie farmers in red tape and stifle innovation. Arguments for more equitable food redistribution causes some to mutter about the effects of big brother, forcing us all to eat a uniform diet. But most daunting, perhaps, is the argument that with a world population poised to reach 9 billion by mid-century, there will never be a way for modern communities to feed themselves by means of local, small farms. Our cities are simply too big, our demands too great to be able to feed ourselves without relying on extremely intensive farms. But luckily, this isn't a lost cause. Take Southern Africa in 1992. That year it suffered the worst drought in 100 years. Harvest shrank by a half, food stockpiles disappeared, and 17 to 20 million people almost starved. Yet apart from in war-torn Mozambique, there was no real crisis. And the story of how Southern Africa overcame the drought is a modern parable for how to feed 9 billion humans. It was the famine that wasn't. And the reasons for this are that Africans adopted the 4 strategies proposed here. First, before the emergency, local plant breeding programs introduced drought-resistant varieties of the crops that small-scale farmers traditionally cultivate. This meant that people had some food to fall back on when their main crops failed. Also, famine early warning systems used up-to-date data and weather forecasts to alert officials to the problems months in advance. Meanwhile, international donors adopted proactive policies like forgiving loans. They also contributed to food storage centers close to vulnerable communities, and so food prices stayed level. As such, local production systems on which poorer communities depend bounced back quickly. The key lesson from Southern Africa in 1992 is that while all these criticisms have their points, they aren't universally applicable, and not across the entire complex landscape of the 21st century food system. To effectively tackle the challenges of feeding the future, the most sensible approach is to imagine these 4 types of solutions as components of a well-balanced investment portfolio. One that's resilient enough to weather economic storms, is still able to provide strong year-over-year returns, and is secure against fraud and theft. Think of new agricultural technologies as similar to high-octane IT stocks. They're an important part of a profitable investment strategy. But an over-reliance on them could cost you your shirt if the market turns against you. Likewise, local food systems are similar to more modest, rainy day investments. They can't be relied upon to feed everyone all the time, but they're a vital buffer between consumers and the dangerous swings of the international market. And of course, every sound portfolio includes a cash reserve in case of emergencies, hence the need for more mechanisms to store and distribute food in times of crisis. Lastly, one of the lessons of the present economic crisis is that left unregulated, financial institutions behave badly. In the same way, we need a robust legal framework to restrain agriculture from destroying the environment. The 1992 Southern African drought passed without excessive hardship, and the agricultural cycle trundled onwards. Historically, it always has. One of the few Old Testament stories to have a happy ending was the tale of Joseph and the Pharaoh's dream. The story recounts how the Pharaoh dreamt that 7 fat cows emerged from the Nile, followed by 7 thin cows who followed them and gobbled the fat ones up. The Pharaoh ended up listening to Joseph, a prisoner in his dungeons, for the correct interpretation. Joseph told him that the 7 fat cows were a good weather report, signifying 7 rich years. They would be followed by 7 dry years of no rainfall whatsoever. To save Egypt from the famine, Joseph advised the Pharaoh to tax his farms, store the grain in silos, and prepare for the rough times ahead. Pharaoh took this advice to heart, and Egypt was saved. Today, stopping the global food crisis may seem like an impossible task. The stakes could not be higher. If we don't change how the world produces and distributes its food, then the suffering and violence of the past few years will be repeated, but 1,000 times worse. But luckily today, we have climate and demographic modeling software that are far more reliable than waiting for God to send a dream to a monarch. These models are quite clear. The years 2050 to 2080 are probably not going to be as productive as the ones between 1950 and 1980. But this doesn't necessarily mean disaster. We can avoid this nightmare and replace it with a vision of a world where no one needs to starve. We have the solutions. All we need now is the will to act on them. What can you do to help? First, go to our website. There's more information about each of the 4 strategies and things you can do to make a difference locally and internationally. We'll release an in-depth video and associated campaign for each of the 4 strategies over the next year, but we need to know which you're most interested in. So go to www.feeding9billion.com and vote on your favorite topic. Then share this on Twitter and Facebook. Send it to your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, your families, and get them to do the same. Our funding will flow if we have enough demand and votes to make the next video. Until then, thanks for watching, and good luck.